What's up, my fellow Shield Brothers? It's the Shield Brother back again for the History Armada on this Saturday, the 8th of February. Today we're going to talk about one of history's most intriguing and diverse characters, Mary, Queen of Scots. So Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, was born December 8th, 1542 in Scotland. She died February 8th on this day in 1587 in I'm going to say this wrong, Northamptonshire, England. In 1542, the Scottish throne went to Mary by death of her father, and she became Queen of Scots. A controversial monarch who became France's queen consort and claimed the English throne. She was executed by Queen Elizabeth I in 1587. So to better understand where she's coming from, let's begin by talking about her family tree. Mary was daughter of King James V of Scotland and his second wife, Mary of Guy. Mary's great-grandfather was Henry VII, making Henry VIII of England her great-uncle. Elizabeth I was Mary's cousin by blood. So here on the right, you can see Mary Queen of Scots family tree, starting with Robert I the Bruce, and moving down to where you see James IV, James V, and then Mary Queen of Scots, and her son, James VI of Scotland, who would become James I of England. But I digress, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. First and foremost, let's talk about her early formative life and years. The death of her father came 6 days after her birth, which left Mary as Queen of Scotland in her own right. Although Mary's great-uncle, King Henry VIII of England, made an unsuccessful effort to secure the control of her and the Scottish throne. You see, Mary inherited Tudor blood through her grandmother, a sister of Henry VIII. So Henry VIII, by turn, tried to secure the throne when she was an infant. The regency of the kingdom was settled in favor of her mother instead. Her mother saw to it that Mary was sent to France at age 5. There, she was brought up at court of King Henry II and his queen, Catherine de Medici, the French royal family, with their own large family, assisted by relations of her mother's side, the powerful Guys. Despite a charmed childhood of much luxury, including frequent hunting and dancing, at both of which she excelled, Mary's education was not neglected, and she was taught Latin, Italian, Spanish, and some Greek. French now became her first language, and indeed, in every other way, Mary grew into a French woman rather than a quote-unquote true Scot. By her remarkable beauty, with her tall, slender figure of 5'11", which was exceptionally tall for a woman of this time period, her red gold hair and amber-colored eyes, and her taste for music and poetry, Mary summed up the contemporary ideal of the Renaissance princess at the time of her marriage to Francis, the eldest son of Henry and Catherine, in April 1558. She had spent a lot of time at this court and learned a lot of different skills and abilities which she excelled at. Although it was a political match aimed at the union of France and Scotland, Mary was sincerely fond of her boy husband, though the marriage was probably aimed at solely the politics. Nonetheless, her early life was one of excellence and well-development. But that leads us to a Game of Thrones. The ascension of Elizabeth Tudor to the throne of England in November 1558 meant that Mary was, by virtue of her Tudor blood, next in line in the English throne. Those Roman Catholics who considered Elizabeth illegitimate because they regarded Henry VIII's divorce from Catherine of Aragon and his marriage to Anne Boleyn as invalid, they even looked upon Mary as the lawful queen. Mary's father-in-law, Henry II of France, thus claimed the English throne on her behalf. The death of Henry II in 1559 brought Francis, her husband, to the French throne, and made Mary a glittering queen consort of France, until Francis's premature death in December 1560, which made her a widow at the age of 18, and they had never consummated the marriage. So she loses this queenship. She does not lose her title of Scotland or her support from the French, but she does lose this marriage. So, returning to Scotland, she In August of 1561, Mary discovered that her sheltered French upbringing had made her ill-equipped to cope with the series of problems now facing her in Scotland. Mary's former pretensions to the English throne had incurred Elizabeth's hostility. Elizabeth did not trust her cousin. She refused to acknowledge Mary as her heiress. However, Mary, nothing if not royal by temperament, prized her English rights. While Mary herself was a Roman Catholic, the official religion of Scotland had been reformed to Protestantism in her absence, and she thus represented to many, including the leading Calvinist preacher John Knox, a foreign queen of an alien religion. So, after her first the death of her first husband, King Francis of France, it was Mary's second marriage in July 1565 to her cousin Henry Stuart, Earl of Darnley, son of Matthew Stuart, 4th Earl of Lennox, that started the fatal train of events culminating in her destruction. Mary married the handsome Darnley recklessly for love. It was a disastrous choice. Because of her marriage, she antagonized all the elements interested in the power structure of Scotland, including Elizabeth, who disapproved of Mary marrying another Tudor descendant, and her half-brother James, who, jealous of the Lennox family's rise to power, promptly rebelled. Nor did Darnley's character measure up to the promises of his appearance. He was weak, vicious, and yet ambitious. The callous butchery of her secretary and confidant David Rizzio in front of her eyes in March 1566 by Darnley and a group of nobles convinced Mary that her husband had aimed at her own life. The birth of their son James in June did nothing to reconcile the couple, and Mary, armed now with the heir she had craved, looked for some means to relieve an intolerable situation. The next 8 months, she was tangled in this controversial period of Mary's career. According to Mary's detractors and her supporters, it was during this period that she developed an adulterous relationship with James Hepburn, right here, and planned with him the death of Darnley, and their own following marriage afterwards. There is, however, no contemporary evidence of this love affair before Darnley's death, except the highly dubious so-called casket letters, poems, and letters supposedly written by Mary to Bothwell, but now generally considered to be inadmissible evidence by historians. But Mary undoubtedly considered the question of a divorce from Darnley after a serious illness in October 1566, which left her health wrecked and her spirits low. On the night of February 9th, 1567, the house of Kirk O'Field on the outskirts of Edinburgh, where Darnley lay recovering from illness, was blown up, and Darnley himself was strangled while trying to escape. Many theories have put forward to explain conflicting accounts of the crime, including the possibility that Darnley, plotting to blow up Mary, was caught in his own trap. Nevertheless, the most obvious explanation that those responsible were the nobles who hated Darnley is the most likely one. But she refused to acknowledge Mary. So, most difficult of all were the Scottish nobles, who were fractious. They were in different factions. They were turbulent. After a series of royal minorities, they cared more for private feuds and clan wars and self-government than support of the crown of Scotland. Nevertheless, for the first years of her rule, Mary managed well with the aid of her natural half-brother James, Earl of Moray, and helped in particular by her policy of religious tolerance. Nor were all the Scots averse to the spectacle of a pretty young queen creating a graceful court life and enjoying her progresses around the country. But after this dubious affair with Darnley and the explosion of the house, whatever Mary's foreknowledge of the crime, her conduct therefore after was fatally unwise and showed how much she lacked wise counselors in Scotland. She did not have the right minds surrounding her in court. After 3 months, she allowed herself to be married off to Bothwell, the chief suspect, after he abducted and ravished her. If passion is rejected as the motive, Mary's behavior can be ascribed to her increasing despair, exasperated by her ill health, at her inability to manage the affairs of the volatile situation that Scotland was at this time period with the different lords and clans, without a strong arm of anyone to support her. But in fact, Bothwell, as a consort, proved no more acceptable to the jealous Scottish nobility than Darnley had been. Mary and Bothwell were parted forever at Carberry Hill on June 15, 1567. Bothwell to exile and imprisonment, where he died in 1578. And Mary was to be incarcerated on the tiny island of Loch Leven, where she was formally deposed in favor of her 1-year-old son James. After a brief fling of liberty the following year, defeat of her supporters at the Battle of Langside put her once more to flight. Impulsively, Mary sought refuge in England with her cousin Elizabeth from the Scottish nobles. But Elizabeth, with all the political cunning Mary lacked, employed a series of excuses connected with the murder of Darnley to hold Mary in English captivity in a series of prisons for the next 18 years of her life. So you can see how this Queen of Scots had to face this Game of Thrones with all these different feudal lords of Scotland, and how this ended up in her imprisonment, and where in the meantime Mary's brother Moray flourished as a regent of Scotland, teaching her young son and his nephew, James I, to rule after her death. It was a turbulent period for her, with lost love, lost land, the loss of her supporters in death in battle, and just a turbulent time for the Queen of Scots. But after this imprisonment by the English for 18 years of her life, it is this captivity in England. Mary's captivity was long and wearisome, only partly allayed by the consolations of religion. She was a devout Catholic and always had her prayer book and ivory crucifix, which you can see here in the back side. She always had her crucifix and her prayer book on her. So she also found comfort in a lapdog and singing birds that she was allowed to have as little pets. Her health suffered from the lack of physical exercise, and her figure thickened and her beauty diminished, as can be seen in the best known pictures of her in black velvet and white velvet, and which I do not include here, but you can see in the top right here where she has gained weight and is not in a flattering position here. But that is to be expected when you spend 18 years of your life in a dark prison with no room for exercise. Naturally, she concentrated her energies on procuring release from an imprisonment she considered unjust, at first by pleas and later by conspiracy. Unfortunately for her survival, Mary as a Catholic was the natural focus for the hopes of those English Catholics who wished to replace the Protestant Queen Elizabeth on the throne. It was the discovery in 1586 of a plot to assassinate Elizabeth and bring about a Roman Catholic uprising that convinced Queen Elizabeth that while she lived, Mary would always constitute too dangerous a threat to her own position. Despite the fact that she was the sovereign queen of another country, Mary was tried by an English court and condemned to death. Her son, James, who had not seen his mother since infancy and now had his sights fixed on succeeding to the English throne, raised no objection to the trial and death of his mother. Mary was executed in 1587 in the Great Hall at Forthinhay Castle near Peterborough in England. She was 44 years old. It was a chilling scene, redeemed only by her great personal dignity, by which she carried herself. Mary met her fate with just a great amount of self-respect and respect for her captors. She went gracefully to her end. It was a dreadful execution, though. It was on the first swing of the axe. The executioner missed her neck and actually just scraped her head, essentially, which it caused her to groan out in pain and start to pray. The second swing of the axe came down thoroughly on her neck, almost severing the neck, but her lips continued to move and blood was just spewing out of her now almost severed neck. And then the third swing would not go through, so the executioner sawed off the remaining skin and bone with his axe. It was a terribly botched execution, an excruciating way to go, and just so undignified for a queen of a nation. But Queen Mary has become a romantic and tragic figure to her supporters. To others, she is a scheming adulteress, if not a murderess, to her political enemies. Mary aroused furious controversy in both her own lifetime and modern debates, during which, in her time, her cousin Queen Elizabeth aptly termed her the daughter of debate. Her dramatic story has continued to provoke argument among historians and citizens ever since. While the public interest in this 16th century female leader has been unabated, it remains a thorough part of Scottish history. Elizabeth died of natural causes, and Mary's son James ascended to the throne his mother had coveted. Almost 4 centuries later, the rival queens lie in London's Westminster Abbey, only a few feet apart. It was a long and dubious life for Mary, Queen of Scots, and it is on this day, February 8th, that she met her untimely and unjust end. But it is a significant part of history because she is the mother of the man who will combine the two crowns, the Scottish crown and the English crown, in the union of the crowns. But that is a story for another time and a lesson for another time. Thank you for watching. This has been the Shield Brother for the History Armada. I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you have learned something about the tragic life of Mary I, Queen of Scots, and her cousin Queen Elizabeth of England. I hope you have enjoyed. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, you can leave those down in the comment section for me. If you would like to subscribe, you can hit that subscribe button. If you liked it, leave me a like. If you did not like the video, go ahead and leave me a dislike. If you ever want to get in contact with me, in the drop-down box below, I have all of my social media and email attached to this YouTube channel. If you have any ideas for videos, I would love to hear it. I'm going to try and keep up with at least monthly videos, but that is the end of this lesson over Mary, Queen of Scots, and as always, I'll catch y'all next time.